The Metropolitan Museum of Art glittered with crystal chandeliers and elegant guests in designer attire. Alex Mitchell stood near the entrance in a borrowed navy suit, feeling completely out of place. At 25, he was a social worker who lived paycheck to paycheck, and this world of wealth and privilege was as foreign to him as another planet. Working at the Brooklyn LGBT Youth Center hardly prepared him for mingling with the Manhattan's elite, but his friend had convinced him the charity gala would be good networking. Alex was about to leave when he saw him. Jason, his ex-boyfriend from Yale, the man who had cheated on him, gaslit him and told him he would never amount to anything. Jason was walking toward him with a smug smile, his new boyfriend on his arm, clearly ready to gloat about his upgrade. Panic seized Alex's chest. He could not face that condescension tonight, could not bear to see the triumph in those eyes. His gaze darted desperately and landed on a man standing alone nearby. Tall, dark-haired, with an air of authority despite looking somewhat bored in his impeccably tailored suit. Without thinking, Alex approached him quickly. "Please wait," he whispered urgently. "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend for 5 minutes. My ex is coming over, and I cannot let him see me alone." The man looked down with surprise, taking in Alex's desperate expression. "Act like you love me, please," Alex added, his voice breaking slightly. Something shifted in the man's expression. Without a word, he slipped his arm around Alex's waist and pulled him close just as Jason approached. "Alex," Jason said, surprise evident in his tone. "I didn't expect to see you here. This doesn't seem like your usual scene." "Jason," Alex replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Blake Westfield," the man beside him said smoothly, extending his free hand while keeping his other arm firmly around Alex's waist. "And you are Jason Reynolds," his ex said, shaking Blake's hand while sizing him up. "How long have you two been together?" 3 months, Blake answered before Alex could speak. "Best 3 months of my life. Actually, Alex is extraordinary. He's brilliant at his work with foster children, compassionate beyond measure. He makes me want to be a better person." He looked down at Alex with such convincing warmth that Alex almost believed it himself. Jason's smug expression faltered visibly. "We should catch up sometime, Alex." "Perhaps," Blake said coolly, his tone suggesting that would never happen. "If you'll excuse us, I promised Alex a dance." As Blake guided him toward the dance floor, Alex felt a mixture of relief and gratitude washing over him. In just 5 minutes, a stranger had shown him more genuine respect than Jason had in their entire relationship. Follow Heart Stories for more tales that remind us sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from moments of desperation. Sometimes pretending to be loved teaches us what real love actually looks like. The jazz band began playing Etta James' "At Last" as Blake guided Alex to the center of the dance floor. His hands settled naturally at Alex's waist, and they began moving to the music. Alex was still trembling, slightly, adrenaline and relief mixing together as the reality of what just happened sank in. "Thank you," he whispered, looking up at Blake. "I'm so sorry for ambushing you like that. I just panicked." "I could see that," Blake said, his voice gentler now. "That was your ex?" "Yes. We dated at Yale. He was awful to me." Alex hesitated, unsure how much to share with this stranger. "He cheated repeatedly, then blamed me for being too focused on my studies instead of his needs. When I confronted him, he said no one would ever truly want me because I was too idealistic, too soft." Blake's expression hardened. "He's an idiot." The conviction in his voice caught Alex off guard. "What you do is valuable. Tell me about your work." As they danced, Alex explained his role at the Brooklyn LGBT Youth Center, working with teenagers who had been rejected by their families. He described the shelter programs, counseling services, and education initiatives he coordinated. Blake asked intelligent questions about state funding, community partnerships, and the psychological impact of family rejection on young people. "Most of these kids just need someone to believe in them," Alex said. "Someone who sees their worth when their own parents couldn't." Alex noticed a couple nearby giving them disapproving glances. Blake followed his gaze and pulled him slightly closer, a subtle gesture of protection. "Does that happen often?" Blake asked quietly. "More than you'd think, even in New York." Alex sighed. "You learn to develop thick skin. You shouldn't have to," Blake replied, his voice carrying unexpected emotion. The music shifted to a slower tempo. Blake's hand remained warm against the small of Alex's back, steadying him. For a moment, neither spoke, both aware of the unexpected intimacy of their conversation. "I grew up in Boston," Blake said suddenly. "Conservative family, private schools, church every Sunday. My parents had my life mapped out before I was born. Harvard Business School, marry the right girl, join the family business. I spent years trying to be exactly what they wanted." "What changed?" Alex asked. "I realized I was living someone else's life." Blake answered. His eyes met Alex's with unexpected vulnerability. "I had to decide if I wanted their approval or my authenticity. It wasn't an easy choice." When the song ended, they remained standing close, the conversation creating an invisible bubble around them. Blake looked down at Alex with genuine interest. "Would you like to stay longer? I'm supposed to be networking, but I'd much rather spend the evening with you." "Are you sure?" Alex asked. "You don't have to keep pretending." "I'm not pretending anymore," Blake said quietly. "I'm genuinely interested in getting to know you better." In that moment, surrounded by wealth and privilege, Alex felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The quiet certainty that someone was seeing him, not for what he lacked, but for exactly who he was. Perhaps the most powerful connections begin when we're vulnerable enough to ask for help and brave enough to accept it when offered. Over the next few weeks, Blake and Alex created a bridge between their vastly different worlds. Their first real date took them across the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset, Blake listening intently as Alex pointed out his favorite views of the city. For their second date, Blake surprised Alex with tickets to Hadestown on Broadway, a show Alex had mentioned wanting to see but could never afford. They balanced between Blake's Manhattan and Alex's Brooklyn. Sometimes they dined at exclusive restaurants where staff greeted Blake by name. Other evenings they spent at Alex's favorite corner cafe, where the owner knew his regular order and asked about the kids at the center. Blake moved through these transitions with unexpected grace, seeming equally comfortable in both settings. On a crisp Saturday morning, Alex finally invited Blake to visit the LGBT Youth Center. He had been hesitant to bring his glamorous new relationship into his work life, but Blake had expressed genuine interest in understanding this core part of him. "This is Miguel." Alex introduced Blake to a 17-year-old with bright eyes and a cautious smile. "He's preparing for college interviews next month. Harvard's my dream school," Miguel explained. "Alex has been helping with my personal statement." Blake sat down with Miguel, sharing his own college experience and offering to review his application. Soon they were deep in conversation about educational opportunities and scholarship applications. Alex watched from across the room, struck by how naturally Blake connected with the teens, never condescending or performing charity, but speaking to them as equals. Later that week, Blake had to cancel their plans last minute. "Emergency board meeting," he texted. "Can't get out of it. Rain check." Alex stared at his phone. Old insecurities surfacing. This was how it started with Jason. Gradual distance, work emergencies, eventually complete disconnection. Despite their growing closeness, Alex couldn't help wondering if this was the beginning of Blake realizing their worlds were too different to reconcile. When they finally met again, Blake seemed preoccupied, checking his phone frequently. "Is everything okay?" Alex finally asked. "Just some pressure at work," Blake replied vaguely. "The board has concerns about certain investments. You never actually told me what you do." Alex realized. "You always change the subject." Blake hesitated. "I run a company. It's not important. If it's causing you stress, it's important to me," Alex said gently. Blake looked at him with unexpected vulnerability. "I'm worried you'll see me differently if you know." "Why would I?" Because people always do, Blake answered quietly. They stop seeing me and start seeing what I can do for them. Alex reached across the table and took Blake's hand. I'm not interested in what you can do for me. I'm interested in who you are. And that night, as they walked through Central Park, Blake finally opened up about the pressure from his company's conservative board members who had raised concerns about his public image after seeing photos of him with Alex. The unspoken reality of his sexuality becoming public knowledge hung between them. Are you ashamed of being seen with me? Alex asked, his voice steady despite the pain behind the question. No, Blake answered immediately. I'm afraid of losing what we're building. Most people in my life want something from me. You're the first person in years who just wants me. Under the park lamplight, Alex saw not a powerful businessman, but someone fighting the same battle he'd seen in countless young people at his center. The struggle between authenticity and acceptance. The true measure of connection isn't in grand gestures or shared circumstances, but in recognizing each other's deepest fears and choosing to stay anyway. The headline glared from Alex's phone screen, Westfield heir spotted with male social worker board members concerned. The New York Post article featured a grainy photo of Blake and Alex at a Knicks game, hands clasped together. Alex sat frozen on his Brooklyn apartment couch, staring at words like billionaire CEO and Westfield Enterprises empire, as the ground seemed to shift beneath him. Blake Westfield wasn't just some corporate executive. He was the heir to one of America's largest private companies, with holdings in everything from real estate to technology. His family name adorned buildings across Manhattan, including the very museum where they'd first met. Alex's phone buzzed with a text from Blake. I can explain. Please let me see you. An hour later, Blake stood in Alex's modest apartment, looking oddly out of place in his casual attempt at inconspicuous clothing, a baseball cap and sunglasses that probably cost more than Alex's monthly rent. Why didn't you tell me? Alex asked quietly. Because I wanted you to know me, Blake replied, removing his sunglasses. Not my bank account. Every person I've dated has been interested in what I have, not who I am. You asked me to pretend to love you for 5 minutes, and I've spent the last month falling in love with you for real. So you just lied. Let me believe you were some regular guy while knowing everything about my life. Alex's voice rose with hurt and confusion. Do you know how humiliating it is to discover from a tabloid that the man I'm falling for is actually Blake Westfield? As if I should have recognized you. I should have told you sooner. Blake admitted. But every day it got harder to find the right moment. What else haven't you told me? Alex demanded. The silence hung between them until Blake finally spoke. The board meeting. They want me to end things with you. Our stock dropped after the photos leaked. Alex stepped back as if physically struck. So that's it? Your company matters more than what we have. No, Blake insisted. I told them I wouldn't do it. That's why I needed to see you, to warn you that things might get complicated. Complicated, Alex laughed bitterly. My life is already complicated. I counsel kids who've been thrown out by parents who were supposed to love them unconditionally. I don't need to be your complication. You're not a complication, Blake said desperately. You're the only real thing in my life. How would I know that's true? Alex moved toward the door. I think you should go. For a week, Alex ignored Blake's calls and messages. He threw himself into work, staying late at the center, avoiding conversations about his sudden change in mood. Then one night, during a thunderstorm that matched his emotional state, there was a knock at his door. Blake stood there, soaked from the rain. No disguise, no pretense. Please, he said simply. 5 minutes. Inside, Blake revealed the truth he'd never shared with anyone. He hadn't been born a Westfield. At 12, after his biological parents discovered his sexuality and rejected him, he spent 5 years in foster care before being adopted by the Westfield family. His funding of foster care programs wasn't corporate philanthropy. It was personal mission. I didn't tell you because I wanted to be sure you'd tell me, Blake whispered. Not my history, not my money, just me. Alex finally understood that their worlds weren't as different as they seemed. They shared the same fundamental wound, the fear that being fully known meant being ultimately rejected. True intimacy isn't built on perfect circumstances or shared backgrounds, but on the courage to remove our masks and trust someone with our most vulnerable truths. 6 months after their first dance, Blake stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Behind him, a banner read, First Annual Mitchell-Westfield Foundation Gala for LGBT Youth Support. The room was filled with celebrities, business leaders, and politicians, along with teens and staff from Alex's center. When I was 12 years old, Blake began, his voice steady and clear. My parents told me I was no longer their son because of who I loved. Tonight, we're creating a future where no child hears those words again. From the front row, Alex watched with pride as Blake announced the Foundation's first initiative, a nationwide network of emergency housing and education support for LGBT youth rejected by their families. What had started as a personal connection had grown into a mission that would change thousands of lives. After the speech, Blake made his way through congratulatory handshakes to where Alex stood. In the same spot where they'd first met, Blake took both of Alex's hands in his. This room looks different now, Blake said softly. Everything does, Alex replied. As they moved toward the dance floor, Alex spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Jason stood near the bar, watching them with an unreadable expression. Blake followed Alex's gaze and tensed slightly. He can't hurt you anymore, Blake whispered. I know, Alex replied. He never could. The only power he had was what I gave him. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, Jason approached them cautiously. Congratulations on the foundation, he said, avoiding eye contact with Alex. It's impressive work. Thank you, Alex replied, his voice calm and confident. He felt no anger, no lingering hurt, only the peaceful certainty of having moved beyond old wounds. As Jason walked away, Blake led Alex to the museum's rooftop garden, against the Manhattan skyline, with the Brooklyn Bridge visible in the distance, connecting their two worlds. Blake dropped to one knee. 6 months ago, you asked me to pretend to love you for 5 minutes, he said, holding up a simple platinum band. I want to spend my life showing you that nothing about my love for you is pretend. Will you marry me? Their wedding took place at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden in autumn, surrounded by falling leaves and rising hopes. The guests included celebrities and business moguls alongside teenagers from the center who had become family to them both. In his vows, Blake spoke words that would later be engraved inside their rings. You taught me that true strength isn't in what we hide, but in what we're brave enough to reveal. The Mitchell-Westfield Foundation has now become one of the largest supporters of LGBT youth in America, creating safe spaces where young people can find what Alex and Blake found in each other: the courage to be authentic and the freedom to be loved for exactly who they are. Have you ever had a moment when pretending to be something led you to discover who you really are? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes our most authentic selves emerge from the roles we play. Follow Heart Stories for more tales of love that transcend boundaries and remind us that our differences don't have to divide us.